I get asked questions like, why is it that we humans are so full of fear? Why are we so dysfunctional? Why, you know, why all the fear? I break it down into love versus fear dynamic. That's one of the, it's just the metaphors I use. And where does all that fear come from? And I talk about, well, what we're doing is that we are evolving, getting rid of our fear, becoming love. That's the point. As you said, our contribution to the whole is to be as beautiful as possible, to make everything beautiful. Well, and I say that we're to get rid of our fears, we're to become love, and that's our mission. Well, we're consciousness, and we are evolving the quality of our consciousness by getting rid of our fear and becoming love. Well, what about the consciousness system? Was it just created, fully done, just a system of love? Or did it too have to evolve to become love, just as we did? And I see that it did evolve. It wasn't always the way it is now. And there's a little bit of evidence for that that's historical. And I see it such that when the larger conscious system, in order to lower its entropy, to have more choice, in other words, more potential possibilities for itself, it created individuated units of consciousness, little subsets of itself, gave them free will, and now it could interact with something else with free will. It wasn't just one monolithic thing. So it interacts with other things with free will. Now, up until that point, the consciousness system was just one monolithic consciousness. And it was only one thing deciding and choosing. Now there were other things with free will, independent of that one thing, that could interact. Suddenly the possibilities of what you can do with that goes up tremendously. And the larger consciousness system had to learn, had to evolve to the point that it understood that the way you have to deal with those independent things is with love, is with caring and with cooperation. And immediately it said, all right, you IUOCs, line up. We're going to, become love. We're going to do these things. We're going to cooperate. We're going to work together. And all the independent little IUOCs, said something like, no way. I'm independent. I'm doing my own thing in my own way. And the system tried to be a little coercive and say, no, that's not the most efficient way. Listen to me. And of course, they didn't. And as the system tried to be a little more heavy-handed and this and that, eventually the system learned, just as we are learning, that the optimal way for us to interact with others is with love, with caring, with cooperation. And the system had to learn that. And the little bit of historical evidence out there is that if you look at old cultures, including the old Israeli culture, but all the indigenous cultures as well, the old cultures, the ones that are millennia old, you'll find that the spirit world was a force to be reckoned with. It was how does the Christians say it? It was a vengeful and jealous God. And it wanted its people to do what it said and to obey and to believe that it knew what was right, and etc. And it turns people into pillars of salt and throws down lightning bolts and does all kinds of things. It's obviously not love yet. Now, by the time we get to the New Testament, out of the Old Testament, we find that God's a God of love and of caring and of cooperation, and we're turning the other cheek, and we're treating others as if we'd like to be treated, and so on. But where does that history of the pushy God, the God with the big ego, who wants to be followed? I think that was the larger consciousness system having to grow up, having to become love itself, because it was no longer a monolithic thing. It had to deal with others. And in that dealing with others, it began to change its own self, what was important, how that had to work, because the system was a system of all of them, all of the free will pieces that were that we're all part of one thing. Yes, it all is just still the one thing, but these are little independent chunks of this one thing that have their own attitudes and have their own choices. So consciousness is awareness that makes choices, and the choices have to have free will, otherwise they're not choices. So that then gives a little evidence for the angry gods of old and very ancient times, the oldest stuff we have, and the God of love now that we have. It's a system of consciousness growing up, learning, lowering its entropy. Love is a low entropy configuration. Fear is a high entropy configuration. So in a way, if you let it be a system and you let it be finite and you let it be not perfect, you can actually see how it too is evolving. It's evolving, we're evolving. We're part of its strategy of evolution. Why do we have this physical reality? Why would the larger conscious system say, oh, I'm going to make a virtual reality for my individuated units of consciousness to log on to? Well, because that helps its individuated units of consciousness grow up. Because otherwise, consciousness just existing in like a big chat room, making choices, interacting with each other, but the consequences are very slight. Make a virtual reality where the consequences are serious, life and death matters, and suddenly the choices are a lot richer and a lot more important. And consciousness evolves by the quality of the choices it makes, by the quality of what it chooses to do, by the quality of its intention, you see? So the fact that we are doing this, it is doing this, we are part of the system's strategy. We IUOCs now, who are in this virtual reality, having to deal with these consequences, have to make choices. Do we make the low entropy choice, the choice on the side of love, or do we make the high entropy choice on the side of fear? And as we evolve, the whole system evolves because we're a part of the system. It's not only that we are it, but it's also us. We're a part of the system. So we are, in part, the strategy that the system has for its own evolution. It has pieces of itself in this virtual reality challenged to grow up, challenged because if we don't grow up and we continue to be making our choices out of fear, our lives are unhappy. They're miserable. We have wars, we have fighting, we have all this dysfunctional stuff going on, which is the stick that encourages us to do better. Because when you do better, you have tranquility and peace and satisfaction and joy. So that's how I see it, and that's how it fits in. And if you don't think of it as a system that is, a finite, real system of consciousness, and you just start with it's done, then it's a much harder thing kind of explaining us as pieces of it and our own evolution and how we fit into it and how you end up with the idea that love is the answer. Well, love is the answer because consciousness is a social system. It's about interactions with others. That's the key thing. That's why love is the answer. Because if you want to optimize a social system, that is a system of things interacting with each other, the way you optimize that is by that system's components being caring, being cooperative, loving, giving. How can I help? How can I serve? That's kind of the whole, that all hangs together. So it is important that it's a system. It is important that it's real, and it's important that we allow it to evolve along with us. And our evolution is actually its evolution because we're pieces of it. It's growing on its own, but it's also growing with us.